So we look for this to be echoed in history. So I give you words of courage from Yehuda HaMaccabee, from the sledgehammer himself, from the mighty general of Yahuwah who led his people to victory. And Maccabees, 1 Maccabees chapter 3, verse 19. For the victory of battle stands not in the multitude of an army, but strength comes from the heavens. They come against us in much pride and iniquity to destroy us and our wives and our children and to spoil us. But we fight for our lives and our laws. Wherefore Yahuwah himself will overthrow them before our face. And as for you, be not afraid of them. I'm calling on the Maccabees of this last generation. Hear my voice. Hear the words that I'm saying to you. This time that is coming upon the world will be a dark time, a time of great tribulation like the world has never seen up until this time. It is time for mighty men, righteous men to stand up. It is time for men who have been sitting on the fence to get off the fence and serve Yahuwah. It is time to dedicate yourself to Yahuwah. It is time to hear the voice of Yahuwah and know that you are going to face persecution. You are going to face all these things. They will outlaw the Torah. They will make it a sin for a man to live according to the righteousness that Yahuwah has described, to keep the Sabbath and all these things. It will happen again. They will persecute us. It happens even now. It happens even now. The time has come. We cannot allow the iniquity to continue to rise. We have to take a stand. All you Maccabees out there, hear this word. Know that the victory comes from Yahuwah alone. It does not come with a host of an army. Now, 1 Maccabees chapter 4, we read about the rededication of the temple. Because we know that Yehuda was able to come into the temple and to purify it and to prepare it and to dedicate it to Yahuwah. And this was a very important time because this took place 3 years later to fulfill the words of the scriptures that all had to be. He was able to do this before all of Israel to encourage them to know that Yahuwah lives and that there is no other and that he gives a victory in Israel. And this in itself was the great miracle, that the abomination of desolation was purged, idolatry removed, this ambiguous idea of the Most High who is carved out in an image form, destroyed. No more of that Jupiter, of that so-called Holy Father of the Greeks and later the Romans. No more of this ambiguous deity. But now the name of Yahuwah would be called upon again. As we even read in the Talmud that the Hasmoneans, who were the Maccabees, enforced that the name of Yahuwah should be used again at this time when they conquered the temple. And so we know that this is important to call on the name of Yahuwah for the rededication of not just a physical temple, but the altar of our hearts. To prepare our lives as a burnt sacrifice, an oblation, a sweet-smelling savor to Yahuwah, that we may be Hanukkah, that we may be dedicated, rededicated to the Most High. It says in 1 Maccabees chapter 4, verse 52, Now on the 25th day, or the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month of Kaslu or Kislev, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning, and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar. They had to build a new altar. They couldn't use that old profane altar any longer. They had to build a new altar. And they did offerings upon it. It says, upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. Look at that time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals. So they dedicated the altar at the same time period that it had been profaned years previous. And they did so with music and gladness. They rededicated the altar of Yahuwah. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising Yahuwah of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication, which is the word Hanukkah, in the Torah. We read about it, remember, at the beginning of the lesson. This is the Hanukkah of the altar in the day that it was anointed. This is the dedication of the altar in the day that it was anointed. And these men were doing a Torah commandment by rededicating the altar as it had been previously done. It says they rededicated the altar 8 days and offered burnt offerings with gladness and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. Now, why 8 days? This is actually a very deep answer. So follow me and listen carefully. The scriptural answer can be found in 2 Chronicles chapter 7 at the dedication of the temple that Solomon dedicated originally to Yahuwah when he, the first to build the temple of Yahuwah, dedicated it. It says in 2 Chronicles chapter 7 verse 8, and Shlomo or Solomon at that time observed the festival 7 days. Now this is the festival of Sukkot, which is tabernacles. He observed the festival. And all Yisrael with him, a very great assembly from the entrance of Hamath to the Wadi of Mitzrayim. And on the 8th day, they held an assembly, for they performed the dedication of the altar 7 days and the festival 7 days. So Shlomo or Solomon strategically marked the festival of Sukkot or tabernacles, which is prophetic, a time that shows that Yahuwah will tabernacle with his people yet again. But he chose this time period to dedicate the temple of Yahuwah. They kept the festival 7 days and they dedicated the altar 7 days. So they did Hanukkah and Sukkot there at the same time period. And it says that it was 8 days because we know that the 8th day of Sukkot is a solemn assembly time. It is a time when the Torah is read, a time of rejoicing. It is a time of gatherings. So many things that happen on the great 8th day of the festival. Okay, so this great 8th day was tied into the dedication of the altar as well, because they're doing offerings and they had just initiated this altar to Yahuwah Elohim for the house of Yahuwah. His presence came into that place, accepted the offering, sent fire, and this is very important to understand because Yahuwah, he gave a great miracle at the dedication of this altar and at this time period. He also did a great miracle at the time of the dedicating of the altar during Ezra's time that we read about in the book of Maccabees. He also did a great miracle at this time. We'll read about that in just a moment, but it's very important to understand that the original reason here for the 8 days of the dedication is because this is what happened at the original time that the temple was dedicated to Yahuwah. So it's 8 days because of Sukkot and because of the dedication of the altar took 7 days, okay? So it's very important. So people say, well, why not 7 days? Well, let's read a little further. We're going to actually go and read verse 59 of 1 Maccabees chapter 3. It says, moreover, Judas or Yehuda and his brothers with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days from the 25th day of the month of Kislev or Kislev with mirth and gladness. So great celebration. A great celebration would be done during this time period. But when we read in the book of Maccabees, we see that the original reason that this was done for 8 days and not just the 7 days for the dedicating of the altar was because in the 9th month, when they rededicated the altar, the Israelites had not been keeping the festivals, especially not tabernacles, because tabernacles would literally require you to set up booths. So for an entire army in the mountains of Yehuda who were trying to hide and do guerrilla warfare against the Greeks, setting up tabernacles and sleeping in them and all that was not very feasible. Now, I'm sure they had some type of camp strategies, but we also know that they stayed in caves because we know that region and we know what they were doing. But the point is that it wasn't very feasible for the entire nation to just go camp out, because previously we saw that Israelites even died on the Sabbath day because they wouldn't fight. They wouldn't even fight back on the Sabbath. But eventually, they realized, we can't keep getting killed on the Sabbath. We're going to have to fight even on the Sabbath day. So the festivals couldn't even be kept properly. Plus, all males were supposed to go to Jerusalem, to the temple for the Feast of Sukkot. So all the males obviously aren't going to go there when the Greeks are occupying this space and they're killing everybody who's keeping the Torah. They're hiding in the mountains. So when they get there and they know that they missed the festival by 2 months, they want to celebrate Sukkot again. They know that it's